Overwatch is shifting gears in a lot of places, including the lore. Let's have a look. Okay, before I start this video, let me get something out of the way. When I start talking about Overwatch lore, one particular old ghost seems to reappear, and that one is PvE. Overwatch PvE was promised back in 2019 as one of the standout features for Overwatch 2, but sadly it got cancelled early 2024. PvE was tied in heavily with the lore, which makes a lot of sense. But no matter how much that sucked, the game has kind of been evolving in a new direction, a PvP direction. And Overwatch can't continue giving us lore without PvE. I've talked about this in videos before. They could do it in the actual PvP games. Look at how Marvel Rivals actually does it. They do a pretty good job at that. Or they could do it with more short stories, comics, animated shorts, and yeah, hopefully eventually a TV series or a movie. But now, however, they seem to focus all of the lore around key moments in the release schedule, like a new hero or even a new feature. For instance, in Season 14, the previous season, we saw a new feature being added, Maximillion's Vault, which is basically a shop feature that offers you big discounts on skins you do not own just yet. It comes around once every season. And thematically, it's completely tied into Maximillion, the money guy for Talon. He has been part of the lore for a long time, but always more on the background, like one of Doomfist's lieutenants. But suddenly, he's more front and center. More recently, a few weeks ago, they introduced Freya, the next hero that will be released in Season 16. And guess who was also part of that animation? That's right, Maximillion. On top of that, in between those two events, there had been a short story that they made into an audiobook. And that short story focused on Maximillion. And interestingly, it told the story of how he and Talon seem to be at odds ends. They seem to be splitting ways. This, like they say here in Belgium, there's a hair in the butter. I don't think they say that anywhere else. Anyways, in the meantime, we haven't seen much of Doomfist and Talon in the lore. And especially the whole null sector invasion, remember that? It's not being mentioned in any of the lore drops. So that had me thinking, which is dangerous. When I start thinking, oh boy. Before they canceled PvE, Team 4, the Overwatch development team, had this huge story arc in mind. They had it planned out, and it was all going to be set around the null sector invasion of planet Earth. Ramatra and his goons were going to flood all of the major cities, hunting down Omnics and putting these weird-ass helmets on their head. To each their own. If that is what you like, go for it, but kinda weird, I'm going to be honest. And we still have no idea what those helmets actually do, and we might never find out. Since that story was going to be unfolded in all of those PvE missions, and as I just told you, PvE was cancelled last year, so yeah. So that leaves us with the 3 missions they initially released, and those are one of the few places where we see anything about the invasion. There's, however, a bundle of short stories that was released last year, where the invasion is basically the hook in every single story that ties everything together. But all of the stories are actually about characters and their relationships, like Symmetra and Lifeweaver, or Ash and Bob. So it's kind of more of a secondary thing. Since then, however, the focus of all of the stories that we've seen have been shifting. A lot of the new narrative seems to focus on politics. Let's just look at 2024. Juno was released first, and her story was about the Mars colony and how those people were abandoned by their employer, Lucheng Interstellar. Venture then puts a spotlight on the Wayfinder Society, and they tried to keep all of the artifacts out of Talon's hands. Hazard is next, and he's stealing vanadium from Oasis, supposedly according to the story to augment himself. But I don't know. In recent lore, it was revealed that they got some inside help, that someone helped them to break into the systems and basically into the building at Oasis University. That could mean that they were actually employed or working for someone else, and that their plans kind of changed along the way as they got pressured by Helix Security, that he decided to kind of, you know, augment himself with the thing they were supposed to bring back. And you can see that in the animation. But who were they working for? Well, look, now Freya seems to be working for Max. For one, in the short story, it's revealed that he no longer sees any benefit in working with Talon. And then he pays Freya to find an Overwatch member, or a former Overwatch member, Emre. All of these are interesting, intriguing stories, kind of making you wonder who's behind all of this. But I can tell you one thing, it's not Ramatra. What is Ramatra? I'm thinking that since they had to cancel the story missions, they basically just skipped this whole invasion story. And they put the focus back on the more old-fashioned faction war, politics, intrigue, much like we saw before Overwatch 2. Instead of making this huge event, they're weaving a tapestry of intrigue and politics to spice up that world that we play in. And I do think that Max is going to play a very pivotal role in all of this. And I don't think he's alone. I think there's more going on here. But they might be positioning him to be the next villain, the next big villain. He was already a bit of a villain, wasn't he? But a villain that is not on the roster and might never be on the roster, because that is going to allow them to add more storylines and use him as a vehicle to push the story of Overwatch forward for the PvP game. And yeah, we might never find out what happened to Nosakta or Ramatra, but we kinda do know. Not too long ago, a concept art by a former Overwatch artist popped up on the internet. It was on his art station, and it showed a heavily damaged Ramatra. He had a bullet hole, a really big bullet hole actually, in his shoulder, and his faceplate was broken. He did not look good, but that image was taken down again from the art station, so I guess Blizzard is not ready to share that story. Not yet, at least. Maybe they don't ever want to, which would kind of be sad. I mean, I still want to know what those helmets were that they put on the Omnic's head. And what did Talon want with Zenyatta? I don't know if you remember this, but at the end of the final mission, we saw Widow, Sombra, and a lot of Talon goons kind of moving in on Zenyatta, who was meditating in India. We'll never know. Unless... Look, I don't like to talk too much about this because I don't want to create any false sense of hope, but I do think there's the possibility, let me emphasize, possibility, that all of the PvE content that they already made and anything that they have planned might be picked up by a different team within Blizzard to be made into a completely separate game from the PvP game that we're playing today. And it will have a completely different monetization model. Maybe there's going to be some ties, but it is going to be a different setup. But if that is really happening, if that is the case, it is going to take years before we hear anything about it. Because one, it's a lot of work, and two, this is Blizzard. And for now, the PvP game is going to bring back the focus on the world that our heroes inhabit and all the politics and the personal stories that are going on there, instead of the whole, I don't know, invasion, bigger meta story. Because that type of stuff, that kind of story is easier to communicate in these content drops or these little comics and short stories that they drop in between. So that's what the future looks like for now. At least that's what I think. I might be completely wrong. However, let me know what you think. Are we going back to these more faction-based stories, or is a big lore plot around the invasion dropping any moment? Let me know in the comments. For now, however, that was it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It always helps me out. I also want to thank my Patreons. I could not make these videos without you guys. You too can become part of the family over on patreon.com/theomnicpost. If you have a few minutes left, maybe check out one of my other videos and make sure to subscribe. But above all, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Bye bye.